I would be embarrassed to behave in such a manner as, you know, as a presumed adult, but we can't guarantee that. Maybe they don't know. Greetings, everyone. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you are here. We're back here playing a little bit of Magic the Gathering Arena, as always. And, you know, feeling just a little bit spiteful today. That's right, folks. We are going to be playing a little bit of Kaervek, the Spiteful. 4 mana, 3/2. Other creatures you control get -1, or other creatures get -1/-1. Not other creatures you control. That would be a very bad card. But other creatures get -1/-1. Now, it does influence your own creatures, but your opponent's creatures as well. So why would we do this? Well, first of all, I was running into an awful lot of the combo deck, the life gain combo deck, where they rely on little 1/1s that just keep showing up and being really annoying, and they're combo pieces because they gain life whenever their creature enters, and, you know, all that kind of thing, right? Very, very annoying. So those are problematic. But also, Elves has a bunch of 1/1s that just show up all the time and make a mess of things. And Goblins show up and make a mess of things. And the Phoenix deck has, as long as they don't have Delirium anyway, a number of very problematic 1/1s. And the Mono Red deck. And I was like, hold on. If 1 toughness is ruining my day on the regular, let's handle that, shall we? So that's what we're out to do here today, is punish all those 1 toughness creatures that are currently running all over the meta. How are we doing that? Well, obviously with Kaervek specifically, but also a backup plan of Meathook Massacre as well. And a little bit of Massacre Girl as well. Whenever it enters, each other creature gets -1/-1 till the end of turn. Whenever a creature dies this turn, each creature other than Massacre Girl gets -1/-1 again. So it can stack up and essentially sweep the board if it turns out that's the way. But, of course, again, our creatures get it as well. So we're trying to break that symmetry a little bit with cards like Paladin Class. You can level it up so that creatures you control get +1/+1. Okay? Similarly, Wedding Announcement. It does pump out some 1/1s, so it gives us a little bit of an aggressive game plan where we're able to maybe flood the board if the situation warrants, but also just eventually it flips over and all of our creatures get +1/+1. So our Kaervek, not super detrimental, but we also have another little piece here that's quite interesting, and that is Slaughter Specialist. 2 mana, 3/3. Whoa, hold on, those are some stats, right? But when it enters, each opponent creates a 1/1. Oh, bummer. But there's more upside yet. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Slaughter Specialist. So she just grows for every creature that dies. And similarly, Yahenni, Undying Partisan, is legendary, so it's just a 1-of here because we don't want to get stuck behind it. But 2/2 haste for 3. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a 1/1 counter on Yahenni. And then you may also sacrifice another creature, and Yahenni gains indestructible, so it can also be difficult to remove. Then, of course, just we're kind of filling in around it. Some extra land drops with Hagra Mauling. Again, a couple of sweepers just in case. And then some Bloodchief's Thirst, some Murderous Riders, of course. Just, you know, get aggressive, trying to beat down. Some lands in the mana base, of course. That's where they belong. Ganjo, just some removal. Nakamura, or Nakanuma. Takanuma. I'll get it right, folks. Largely because we are creature-based, and it's good. As far as the other things, Castle Ardenvale, just so that if we do have, like, Wedding Announcements, Paladin Classes down, really being able to get additional creatures down takes advantage of these, you know, quite well. And then the Hive, the Eye Tyrant, for a little Graveyard Hate. That said, let's get some games, shall we? Alright, folks, here we are up against Ting Tong. Good luck, Ting Tong. And yeah, this hand looks fine. We have a Massacre Girl hiding out behind my shoulder there. Knight of the Ebon Legion, going to start things off. Since we're on the play, a Swamp comes down. Our opponent reading the Knight of the Ebon Legion. Fair enough, Ting Tong. They go with their own Swamp, only there's a snow-covered. So we have a bit of a choice here. If we go with the Brightclimb Pathway on white, we can't Gifted Aetherborn, and potentially we won't be able to Murderous Rider the next turn. But then, of course, there's no guarantee we will draw more white, but that's all right. Let's, you know, we can play a mono black game plan for the time being if we need to. So we go on the black side, one of those really problematic situations that can occasionally come up with pathways as your primary lands of choice. Opponent goes with Hive the Eye Tyrant, not a bad turn too, and examining the board. Problematic, I'm sure, because we have 2 creatures on board, and we're threatening land into Knight of the Ebon Legion activation. So our opponent's probably thinking, are we supposed to remove their cards or what, you know? They eventually just hit us with a Thoughtseize and see what's going on in our hand. They go with the Murderous Rider and pass. Alright, well, now we have options again. No land drop, serious bummer. We really didn't want to miss a land drop. So we get into combat, do 3 damage, get the Slaughter Specialist down to give our opponent a 1/1. Inconvenient. It's never nice when you're missing land drops and advancing your opponent's board position. But considering they had plenty of creatures, we're only just so sad about this. Opponent Agonizing Remorses. And it's thinking about what to do with our hand. They eventually, after a fair amount of deliberation here, are forced to take the Knight, I assume, because it's, you know, it's the only card we can actually play. The other cards are kind of threatening, but we can't play either of them. We're a long way from Massacre Girl, and the Paladin Class requires us to draw a white land, right? So our opponent defies our thought process a great deal and goes with the Paladin Class, which suddenly makes us really, really concerned that it must be Meathook Massacre in our direct future, or potentially just another, you know, conventional board sweeper. Our opponent does trade off, or I mean, chump block with the 1/1 and gets Slaughter Specialist down. We debate fairly heartily here about not playing the Slaughter Specialist because we're worried about the incoming board sweeper, but at the end of the day, Ritual of Soot kind of gets us, but unless it's specifically Ritual of Soot, I think this position is pretty good for us. In fact, our opponent does not have Ritual of Soot, so our situation pays off. We do finally get the land, thank heavens, and it's time for combat. We're going to try and capitalize here. Yeah, we risk trading off the Slaughter Specialist for the Tenacious Underdog, but, you know, that's okay, because the other Slaughter Specialist is kind of running amok there. Alternatively, they can double block the larger Slaughter Specialist and kill it, but then the secondary Slaughter Specialist has grown quite a bit. And, of course, all of this is, you know, threatening to allow a lot of damage through. So, we're okay with all this. Ting Tong really, really deep in the tank. This player, very, very deliberate here. Does eventually double block the larger Slaughter Specialist. We activate Knight of the Ebon Legion, say, okay, we're going for the tempo plan. We really don't want to commit further to the board. But just making this play affords us the opportunity to drop our opponent way down on life. We're kind of anticipating a removal spell, but that's okay, because, again, they're now having to remove our 1-drop. They spend 2 mana to kill our 1/1, and the Slaughter Specialist still stands to grow a great deal. Here we go. A couple of 1/1 counters go on to Slaughter Specialist. Of course, just 2 of them, because the other 2 Slaughter Specialist triggers were from the one that was dying. But our opponent now in a really awkward situation, right? They know about our Knight of the Ebon Legion in hand, so, you know, just sweeping doesn't really help much. They do go with Lulth, though. That's awkward for us. So, briefly deliberate going after Lulth and decide, no, let's just keep the pressure on, try and force our opponent into a bad situation. They have to at least chump the Slaughter Specialist, if not also the Gifted Aetherborn. Probably doesn't matter who he attacked, but if we go after Lulth, there's a good chance they do let it through. Maybe they have another Lulth in hand. This way, it just makes things awkward on our opponent. It affords us the opportunity to develop the board further with the Knight of the Ebon Legion. I believe they would have swept last turn if they had the opportunity before playing the Lulth. So we're in the enviable position of saying, okay, sacrifice your Lulth or die, sort of thing, you know? And our opponent does that. The question is there another Lulth? If they have a second Lulth in hand, this is kind of concerning, right? So our opponent does end up passing. We're pretty happy about that. Oh boy, Murderous Rider is a good one. Because our opponent's going to have to block very, very deliberately here to just stay in the game. Unless they have a removal spell. But if they have a removal spell, then that makes our position even better. So we decide, okay, let's draw out the removal spell, because it's pretty clear they have one. Otherwise, they would have animated the Hive of the Eye Tyrant, I'm confident. So pump the Knight of the Ebon Legion. It does give up our turn, but that's okay. Opponent just on a couple of cards. Prepared to take a couple of damage, almost certainly. So that makes the Tenacious Underdog a very, very risky play. Dropping to 3, and then paying 2 life for a card is, you know, sketchy, we'll say. Opponent deliberating what to do with their hand. And eventually goes Murderous Rider on the Large Slaughter Specialist. Okay. Drops to 3. Ay-yi-yi. Our opponent living life on the edge here. And thinking they might be able to regenerate some of that life, the Murderous Rider coming up here in just a minute or two. Trying to decide what to do with the final card in hand, which we're assuming is a removal spell, right? And it is a Heartless Act, does hit our Knight of the Ebon Legion, and the opponent takes 2 down to 1. 4 power remains on board. And the opponent plays a Murderous Rider, ready to try and strike back with some of these creatures, because our life total is ridiculously high. This Gifted Aetherborn has gotten 10 points of, damage dealt this game. Whether to creatures or to players or whatever, doesn't really matter. It's 10 points, right? Which means we're now 10 points of life higher than we were before. Opponent does crash into 2, 4-2, dropping us down to 28, but that's still an interminably long distance away when you're sitting at 1 life. We draw another Gifted Aetherborn off the top. Feels good, man. Opponent double blocks. This is not unanticipated. Of course, we drew the Murderous Rider, so we're feeling good about that. And oh no, what do you... Oh, I mean, it's not a disastrous one because our, at least the Gifted Aetherborn has Death Touch, but oh my gosh, allowing our opponent to gain 2 life here is absolutely brutal. Feeling pretty bad about that. Just kicking myself super, super hard because, in my mind, it was just like, oh, Death Touch, it doesn't matter. And so I just, playing briskly, to be flatly honest, Ting Tong, playing very deliberately here. I was, like, can we move on with it, please? Sort of thing going on in my mind. You know how it is. But boy, that is the wrong tack to take. And definitely ended up costing us here. Okay, still no extra land. Kind of a bummer. Really, really want to deploy the Massacre Girl at some point here. So we decide, okay, this is a little bit aggressive, particularly if they have a sacrifice outlet like Deadly Dispute or Village Rites or something. We kind of get punished there on that line a little bit. But we're trying to reclaim the tempo. We have a good amount of tempo, but making our opponent sacrifice lands is a pretty good place to be, I think, given that they only have just the 2 Hive of the Eye Tyrants. And we go back up to 30. 30 is a lot, right? So the opponent does... Oh, no! Pulls an Invoke Despair, I'm sorry, off the top. Makes us sacrifice our beloved Gifted Aetherborn, and then plays a Tenacious Underdog. Oh, hey, look at there. Meathook Massacre coming in clutch. Going to hopefully help us drain our opponent out of the game. Desperately regretting giving our opponent those extra 2 life here. Oh my gosh. Because just playing the Murderous Rider is essentially lethal because they can't kill it. And we don't expect a ton of exile over there, But it is what it is, right? Oh boy, interesting. So now Hagra Mauling shows up. And we have to debate. How important is it to deploy Massacre Girl next turn? Because if we hold on to the Hagra Mauling, we might be able to sneak the Hagra Mauling in on a Hive of the Eye Tyrant block, potentially. Well, okay. Opponent then says, I've had enough of this game. and uses Murderous Rider to escape it. I'm not sure they were thinking about Meathook Massacre, but all the lines we took after that were kind of irrelevant, so GG opponent. Alright, folks, here we are up against Duca di Fumagalia. I'm not sure. Fumagaya? I'm not sure. Whatever. We have a Luminarch Aspirant come down on the other side. Inconvenient, but the good news is we do have a Bloodchief's Thirst, so we're taking the Bolt the Bird style approach here. I know those are not Bird's Paradise or anything even really analogous to it, but it's a 1-mana 1/1 that's very, very threatening. It advances our opponent's board state a great deal, so we find it, you know, worthwhile to remove. We now are presented with a pretty unenviable decision here about how to go about this upcoming turn, and we decide that Slaughter Specialist is fine to deploy because we don't want to give our opponent a bunch of life, right? But if we are going to gain them life with the Slaughter Specialist, we might as well do it now before they have like an Ajani's Pridemate style creature down, you know, Voice the Blessed or Trelasara or something, right? Or even just getting a Heliod down or something, right? So if we're ever going to give them a 1/1, now's a good time. It also frees us up to gain value on the Murderous Riders, right? We can then fire them off, and our Slaughter... Not only are we removing our opponent's threat, but we're also growing our Slaughter Specialist, which is, you know, not too terrible. Hey, Iganjo feels good, man. Hitting our land drops is good, but so is just, you know, having another potential way of interacting. Of course, we decide to pass because we were kind of worried about our opponent just slamming a... Oh, no. Slamming a Collected Company and having us kind of lose the game there. Now I'm realizing, no, I guess the line was kill Trelasara. So we should have done it before the Adeline actually resolved. But it's still better to make the right play, even if you've kind of goofed a little bit. Very clearly, I was not playing at my best on this particular day, and feeling kind of bummed about it. So, Fumagalia does decide, or Fumagaya, I'm not sure, does decide to attack with the Luminous Phantom, and they gain some life in the process, but we also grow our Slaughter Specialist, so in some ways good, in some ways not so good. But here we are yet again, faced with decisions, and trying to decide how to deploy said decisions. So we decide to shock in and deploy a Paladin Class. We have another Murderous Rider just waiting. But we don't expect our opponent to trade with the Adeline here. In some ways, we kind of expected a chump block with the 1/1. But they didn't do it. So that led me to believe, well, they've got a plan. And if we don't ever advance our plan, we're just going to lose, right? So we go with Wedding Announcement to try and get ourselves on the board because our opponent is very clearly doing things. So, conveniently enough, our opponent kind of swings out, gains a bunch of life, Voice of the Blessed grows, Voice of the Blessed grows, and we take a risky line and trade with a 1/1 just to grow our Slaughter Specialist and take a point off the board, growing the Voice of the Blessed now so that we will have the opportunity to remove it with Murderous Rider before it grows too much more, you know? So here, briefly debate pitching the Iganjo. The problem with pitching the Iganjo is, or, you know, putting it down as a land, is it can remove Adeline all on its own. So as a removal spell here, we're afraid it might be more valuable, right? And I'm not sure if that was the right line or not. Oh my goodness. Voice of the Blessed, now is about to grow to indestructible, so we have to get rid of it. Decidedly inconvenient, but Voice of the Blessed, Voice of the Blessed. Ay, ay, ay. And here they come, inconveniently enough. Opponent going to swing with Adeline here, so if you're going to swing with Adeline, I agree. I think you should just go all out. Because now you're going to get more, you know, you're going to get some damage through, right? This is better. And decided that we were not going to be able to win the game if we didn't keep our Slaughter Specialist around. So right now we're kind of hoping for, I don't know, a miracle. It's got to be a removal spell on the top. And, oh boy, hold on. Hold on. That is one. So we decide to get in. Our opponent, not sure what we're up to, elects to just take it all. So we Massacre Girl. And Slaughter Specialist grows. Massacre Girl gets some things to happen, right? The problem is they had the stupid Luminous Phantom that I wasn't computing for. And turns out we're still just dead. No! Yeah. Oh, well. So we draw our Slaughter Specialist. The Wedding Announcement flips, or Wedding Festivity flips, and darn those one toughness creatures. This is the, this is what we were being hateful about, the Adeline's creating 1/1s and the stinking, Prosperous Innkeepers being 1/1s, or, well, 1 toughness creatures and all that stuff, And sure enough, they still come back to get us anyhow. Bummer, man. Bummer. All right. That said, GG, opponent. GG. All right, folks. Here we are up against Samael. Good luck, Samael. Godless Shrine. Going to be our opener here. We don't really have a 1-drop, so not I think we need to concern ourselves with too much. That is a Massacre Girl behind my shoulder there. Opponent goes with Kumano faces Kakazan. Oh no, we're in the mono white or mono red matchup. All right, fine. You got to do what you got to do. So we're gonna give them a creature because naturally that's what you want to do, is help your mono red opponent develop their board state and go wider. But whatever. It turns out that this is a situation that's acceptable, given the fact that we were on the play. I think if we were on the draw, things would be much worse, right? So our opponent gives the Fervent Champion a counter, and this is like the fishiest attack I've ever seen in my life. It could be that they were, just bluffing there, and since they have to light up the stage, it's very possible. But giving up our Slaughter Specialist for no value seems like a terrible idea. So we just go ahead and swamp. Don't hesitate, Murderous Rider. It's time. Get rid of that Fervent Champion. The first strike is really problematic here, and the Slaughter Specialist grows up to a 4/4. See, the thing here is now shocks aren't good enough. You gotta have a 3 damage burn spell if we block your 1/1. So those things kind of nice here. The opponent goes with a tap down to the Bugbear, a Gitu Lava Runner, and now they have decisions to make. Likely. Sure enough, there was a shock. We properly played around that. Opponent goes and scries, but now they're tapped out. There's none of this fooling around nonsense here, so they don't try and bluff us or anything. They just pass turn. Well, okay, we have a surprise for you. It's Meathook Massacre. Going to grow our Slaughter Specialist real nicely and gain some life to boot, up to 15, crash in for 5, but it's not a 5/5, folks. It's a 7/7, because, of course, Meathook Massacre giving it -/- until the end of turn. But that's going to be really tough for our opponent to push through, given that, we have the onboard Meathook Massacre that's also going to be able to gain us life as our opponent's creatures die, right? So, oh boy, interesting. That's a good one. So we're trying to decide what to do, whether it's deploy the Paladin Class or the Murderous Rider. Our opponent just says, oh, forget it. It doesn't matter what cards you have. We can't win. And scoops them up. In fairness, I agree, opponent. You couldn't win. GG. All right, folks. Here we are up against General Jimmy Jam. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Down to the Bugbear. Oh, no. Into Fervent Champion. Well, folks, our mono red player or opponent is on the play, and this is a terrifying place to be. This is one of the reasons you play mono red. Is first of all because it's really quick, and a lot of the time you want to get your wins in. Some people just also enjoy the playstyle, and that's fine too. But I'm saying one of the primary draws to playing it in best of 1 on Arena is just how quick it is. Well, okay, but your best of 1 win rate is also typically extraordinarily high. So here they are. getting in there, getting early, getting often. Here comes a Burning Tree Emissary in to light up the stage after a Fervent Champion crashes in. So we're just going to go ahead and develop your board. Don't worry about us, opponent. Don't worry about us. Opponent, reading Slaughter Specialist. And trying to decide how to go about it. What? Thundering Rebuke into Kamado faces Kakazan. Our opponent is clearly on a very, very creature-heavy version. Hence the Burning Tree Emissaries and the Thundering Rebukes. You know, if you're on spell-based, they all go face, all of it. So that little bit of information there is actually very, very important to us. So we pop down the Yahenni so that we have a blocker here, because I think we're in a situation where we're planning on blocking almost anything there. Oh no, another Thundering Rebuke, because we kind of figure, yeah, our opponent's not going to have a ton of removal. As it turns out, they do have at least one more removal spell, and boom, Kaervek the Spiteful hits the board with a thump for the first time in this game, and Burning Tree Emissary a 1/1, Etching Zakumano a 1/1. And the Den of the Bugbear now much less effective, because one of the best things about the Den of the Bugbear is it helps you go wide while still being a creature land. And of course, all those creatures will just immediately die. The opponent, with that final card in hand, it is almost certainly not a removal spell, lest they would have done it. So we decide Paladin Class first, because that way if our opponent has some kind of response, they kind of get punished for it by having to pay extra mana. So we briefly debate using the Hagra Mauling as a land. Getting up to double spell in a turn is kind of nice, and at, you know, a bunch of 3-drops in hands, it could really help. The opponent pulls a Play with Fire off the top. Most likely, I think if they had that, they absolutely would have been crashing in last turn. So sure enough, Fervent Champion was the final card in hand, which is why they waited to deploy it. But darn it, oh boy, opponent, sorry about that. We have Kaervek the Spiteful ready to go, and you know, we're briefly debating here whether it's supposed to just be Paladin Class level up and just grow our team, or potentially Wedding Announcement, just get more dudes on the board and get the Wedding Announcement going, or get the Kaervek down. It's clear that our opponent was having a bit of a hard time handling it, and sure enough, General Jimmy Jam saying no thank you, please, no more, no more. GG opponent, GG. Alright, folks, here we are up against Schmert. Good luck, Schmert. And yeah, I think this hand is keepable. Again, Yahenni, Undying Partisan, over here on the end, behind my shoulder, and Godless Shrine joining the party as well. Of course, briefly debate our plan here and realize, oh crud, our Bloodchief's Thirst doesn't do anything here because it's not an instant. So this is very clear. It's Godless Shrine time. What were you thinking? And no idea. So the opponent goes with Seer Step Pathway and Goldhound. Hold on just a darn minute. A second Goldhound. What is going on over there? These are certainly not mainline meta-style creatures, but, you know, fine creatures to be sure. Can be used as either ramp, because they are treasures, or just, you know, attackers. They're 1/1 first strike menace. Like, holy crap, that's, you know, now we're talking, right? So the opponent 5 cards in hand, and potentially access to as much as 4 mana. Ooh, what? Xander's Lounge comes down tapped, and the opponent debating how to go about this. They do in fact decide to get in for menacing damage. Makes it a little bit suspicious. So we decide to get in, regenerate the life we just lost, and briefly debate Wedding Announcement, but decide that access to that mana could prove problematic, you know, if they're on, like, you know, trying to get to Goldspan Dragons or something like that. You know, whatever, 5 mana spells, just having the 8 mana on board here is kind of potentially problematic. So we decide to play it safe, trade a 1-drop for a 1-drop, use Bloodchief's Thirst on Goldhound, and pass. The opponent goes with Clearwater Pathway on the blue side, and sure enough, Tezzeret Betrayer of Flesh comes down. Holy cats, folks, that was not what we were expecting, and Tezzeret Betrayer of Flesh ticks down, making the Goldhound into a 4/4 menace. First strike. Now, that's a creature, folks. That is a creature. So, unfortunately for our opponent, we do have a ready-made answer for it. It's Murderous Rider in hand. Of course, that's going to grow our Slaughter Specialist. Either way, our opponent does have the opportunity to deny us our Murderous Rider, which is unfortunate, but this is absolutely worth it for us, because the Tezzeret Betrayer of Flesh being on 2 loyalty means we still have the freedom to get rid of it, And, you know, again, the opponent's still sacrificing a creature, so the Slaughter Specialist is still going to die. The opponent, of course, sees no reason to give up their chump to, you know, just have Tezzeret die in you know, anyway, and moves on with their turn. We, on the other hand, are really hoping for a land at some point, because being able to play Paladin Class and level up Paladin Class seems like it would be good. The opponent does a little drawing, does a little discarding. It's just loot 2, unless you discard an artifact, and then it's kind of a, you know, whatever, a chart a course or something like that. As it turns out, our opponent had flooded out just a little bit, so was able to discard 2 lands, and they're feeling quite good about that, all things considered. So we briefly sit here thinking about it and decide, you know what, no, this is fine. Yahenni, come down, and our opponent, if they want to save their Tezzeret, which they likely do, they have to jump in front of the Slaughter Specialist, which will grow both the Slaughter Specialist and the Yahenni. So I think that is reasonable. And notably, it does prevent them from being able to play an artifact and then tick Tezzeret down and gain that benefit. Admittedly, the opponent's still going to be doing a lot of looting, which is scary at this stage of the game. We assume our opponent has some number of like board sweepers, things like that. But if it is Meathook Massacre style board sweepers, Yahenni can gain Indestructible, and Slaughter Specialist is just large enough that the Meathook Massacre doesn't get rid of it. I'm sorry. If it's Meathook Massacre, the Slaughter Specialist is going to survive. If it's like Ritual of Soot or whatever, the Yahenni is going to be able to survive, right? So, you know, they can't really just get us in either way, right? As far as, you know, blow us out or whatever. So we're not super worried about the board sweeper. Opponent looking at and reading our cards, thinking about things. 3 cards in hand, 5 mana available. The clock is ticking, Schmert. They did discard a Greasefang Okiba Mob Boss, which is definitely something that we're aware of and concerned about, to be fair. There's a debate here going on in our mind. What happens if they have a removal spell that they point directly at Yahenni? Do we sacrifice the Gifted Aetherborn in response to protect the Yahenni? The Yahenni is able to grow, but the Gifted Aetherborn has Death Touch and Lifelink, which is, you know, relevant. And the Yahenni, of course, only growing when our opponent's creatures die, right? So, opponent plays a Shipwreck Marsh, gets in, makes Treasure Token. This seems like one of the most aggressive attacks we've seen in recent history. Opponent makes a treasure, has 1 card remaining in hand. It could be a removal spell. They've done a lot of looting, so there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't be that, but we're still at our starting life total here. They only just brought us back down to parity. We miss another land drop. Not great. So we briefly debate going to combat first, because then we might be able to use it to remove the Tezzeret. But we decide, you know what? Actually, if they had something, they would have deployed it already. So we just decide, you know what? No, we're not wasting a bunch of time trying to make sure Tezzeret goes away. There isn't anything that damaging over there anyway. Let's just get him. And Murderous Rider on the dragon, Gifted Aetherborn into the Tezzeret, a whole bunch of damage onto the face, and Schmert staring at really nasty looking board here, and only 7 life of their own to show for it. We have, of course, 4 cards in hand because, darn it, we can't draw lands. Convenient. Is what it is, though. As long as we get 3, this deck functions for the most part. Opponent has an All Runs Epiphany. Okay. Fine. And they take the turn right on back. 2 cards in hand. Opponent, not strictly like an Explorer style take an extra turn thing. No, they do advance the board with flyers. And so it's essentially like an Explorer for 7 mana that gives you 2 haste birds or something. You know, it's not super exciting. But it is what it is. And the opponent has Galazeth Prismari trying to stop the bleeding here, allowing their treasures to be tapped for mana rather than having to be sacrificed, and also makes a treasure. The deal is, this is still not that good. We're still just a land drop away from being able to either Paladin Class level it up, or something of the nature. It is possible we were just supposed to slam a wedding announcement earlier to try and, you know, get a land drop, you know, draw extra cards and things like that. So maybe last turn allowing the Goldspan Dragon to live would have been a thing, but we're worried that they might be able to capitalize. Now, admittedly, I think given the actual state of the game, I think that turned out quite well because of the extra turn spells and things, but boom, finally, land drop, Paladin Class, level up, and our opponent in pretty rough shape here to be sure. Slaughter Specialist lethal on its own, but if Yahenni and the Gifted Aetherborn both connect, that's also lethal. So two things need to be blocked is what we're getting at here, right? Not a huge deal because Galazeth Prismari then can theoretically stay on the board. But that in that case, our opponent is still losing life down to 4. And, you know, we're a land drop away from being able to level up Paladin Class and make every one of our threats individually lethal, right? Because, of course, Yahenni now individually lethal. Slaughter Specialist, of course, individually lethal. If we leveled up the Paladin Class, now Gifted Aetherborn would also be individually lethal. So our opponent in a real spot here. There are plenty of cards that kind of do a good job of cleaning things up, but not that good of a job, right? So as we talked about before, not really enough mana for Meathook Massacre to do what you want it to do. In this case, it would actually be abysmal. But the fact that Yahenni can gain Indestructible means even, you know, whatever. They don't have any snow lands, so I'm not expecting Blood on the Snow. But, you know, even a card like that, or Crux of Fate, since they've shown us some dragons, maybe that could be a thing. Okay, Yahenni still stays indestructible. So while Galazeth would be able to chump block the Yahenni the next turn, it's not like the board gets better for them, right? So we're really liking our position. Opponent allowing the time to tick down. I don't think they're necessarily roping us here. I think they recognize that this is the most important turn of the game, that the game has quite possibly already been decided, but any opportunity for them to come back has to begin this turn, right? They're very dead. They can't pass the turn here, obviously. And the maneuvers they make are going to be what decides whether or not the game can be won. So they decide to tap their treasures for Deadly Dispute, sacrifice a treasure, draws a couple more cards, allowing the time to kind of tick down here. And finally decides, no, there just is no way. So they are forced to scoop up. It was a good game, though. Schmert, definitely a good game. Glad to have been a part. It was an honor. All right, folks, here we are up against Spau. Good luck, Spau. And yeah, I think this is a fine hand. We're not strictly thrilled about it, but it is what it is. We briefly debated Paladin Class on 1, but we want to be able to get down a Slaughter Specialist on 2, ideally. So we go with Hagra Brood Pit. It turns out that we would have been able to anyway, so it happens, but, you know, whatever. These are the calculated decisions you are sometimes forced to make. Slaughter Specialist comes down, makes our opponent a 1/1, and we pass the turn. Ramen Up Runes for our opponent does cost them 1 life to be able to deploy the Gitu Lava Runner on 1. And now they're looking at their hand, trying to decide how to navigate turn 2. If you're playing Ramen Up Ruins and tapping it, that likely means they don't have a plethora of lands in hand, which is good for us, because maybe they missed some land drops or whatever, and we're able to capitalize. But it's also bad for us, because clearly that means they've likely got just action on top of action here, or whatever. I seriously doubt they're like, you know, they're stuck on 1 land sort of thing. But yeah, I was gonna say, but it is likely maybe they have another Ramen Up Ruins or something, right? So they go down to 18, they do attack. We decide, no blocks. This is fine. We're not excited about it, but it is what it is. Take the damage, and the opponent does have Skewer the Critics. Oh, inconvenient. Well, is what it is. I have to believe they also have a Shock in hand now, which is why they attacked first. But then the Skewer the Critics, of course, being able to handle it, could just mean that they needed to trigger it. I think it's unlikely that that's the case. I think they more likely didn't want to waste their Skewer the Critics there if they didn't have to. So the opponent does deploy a Den of the Bugbear and 4 cards remaining in hand. Likely all of it is action. Den of the Bugbear would have come out of the hand last turn if they had it. Sure enough, a 3 damage burn spell hits, and Gitu Lava Runner and the 1/1 crash in. We're down to 10. Not strictly thrilled about it, but it is what it is. So Murderous Rider joined the party. Knight of the Ebon Legion joined the party. This is not something we're strictly excited about, being at 10 life against mono red, but it is what it is. You know, you gotta play the cards you're dealt. Opponent with 4 cards in hand, you know, it's likely even that there's multiple burn spells over there, probably 3 damage burn spells if I had to guess. And, you know, possibly one of them being a shock, one of them being a 3 damage burn spell, things like that, you know, and we're not thrilled about any of this, right? But I do think we're now priced into blocking because our life total is so low. We recognize we're probably walking into some kind of shock situation or whatever, but what do you do, right? We're just, we're in a situation where we have to protect our life total. I think in the long game, we stand a very good chance, given what we've seen from their deck so far, but we've got to get to the long game, otherwise we're going to die. So, little blocks happen. Opponent very carefully deliberating. They go Spikefield Hazard. Oh, that's inconvenient. So, our Murderous Rider actually gets exiled, so that's kind of a bummer. Not the end of the world. We gain life back up to 12, so that part feels good. Oh, the opponent. Oops. All right. Well, that was a bit of an oops, I suppose. Maybe they, oh, no. It wasn't that they were trying to, you know, like, make the right decision and didn't. They're just trying to be rude, which is okay, Spow. I would be embarrassed to behave in such a manner as, you know, as a presumed adult, but we can't guarantee that. Maybe they don't know. So Chandra's Kill does hit, and exiles a spell. Okay, well, fine. So we're going to go ahead and attack here, and pump, and kill the Chandra's Kill, and deploy a second Paladin Class. Remember now, folks, our opponent's stuff going to cost more to, you know, more to cast on our turn, so they really kind of, at this point, need to be playing at sorcery speed, which is a fine place for us to have them. Unfortunately, they pull a Skewer the Critics off the top. That's not ideal. Bummer. But oh boy, hey, wedding announcement. That feels good. We're quite pleased about that. Decide to hang on to the Aganjo because we could be maybe killing a Den of the Bugbear or something like that. But keep in mind, remember, we leveled up the Paladin class earlier. We have developed that portion of the board. So our 2/2 now trades with the Den of the Bugbear unless whatever came off the top is another burn spell. Nope. Mountain comes out and a Soulscar Mage, and the opponent trying to decide if they want to trade away the Den of the Bugbear, and as a matter of fact, they elect to do so. Likely more about the fact that they advance their own board with a 1/1 and get some damage in. What they don't know is that we are prepared with a Bloodchief's Thirst and a second wedding announcement, folks, and that's going to be generating quite a bit of value, all things considered. 2/2 and 2/2. Spow in rough shape. They are going to be struggling here just a little bit. At 11 life, though, we're hardly safe. Those Ramanop Ruins will be taxing us some as time goes on. We know that. And we also know, given what we've seen from their deck, they're relatively spell-heavy. First of all, the Soulscar Mages kind of dictate if you're going to be decking that card. You're likely playing a lot of spells. But we've also seen quite a few spells, right? So they activate Ramanop Ruins, pull a couple of cards off the top. It's a land and a Vishnu Pyromancer. The deal is, though, we're just kind of getting larger than our opponent, for lack of a better word, right? So we do decide, no, it doesn't really make much sense to attack with both and draw cards when all we want is more things to hit the board. Since we know the wedding festivities is going to flip over, or the wedding announcement is going to flip over into wedding festivities, and we're going to have 4/4s next turn, our chances of winning on the crackback, relatively strong. Now, it turns out they draw another Vishnu Pyromancer off the top, so that is relatively problematic. But, you know, we level up and decide time for battle and try and decide how to go about it. Give double strike here on the 7/7, and our opponent, facing a bit of a tough spot, does elect to block, which is not enough, so they need to block again. And looking at taking a good chunk of damage there. No, this is lethal, opponent. You can't block that way, but it turns out they do anyway, and the damage is dealt. Good game, Spell. Good game. All right, folks, here we are up against Erroneous, and yeah, that's a Massacre Girl over here behind my shoulder. Shattered Sanctum comes out of the hand, tapped, of course, since we're on the play. Feeling good about that. Our opponent goes with Rafine's Tower. Oh, crud. All right, so given that we are in this format, we're kind of worried it could be Greasefang, right? I think there's primarily two different ways of playing Greasefang. One is either like a Mardu situation, or it's the more common is Esper. You're essentially kind of playing an Esper controlling style game plan, but you also just have the Greasefang combo in there. So sometimes, you know, you win on turn 2 or whatever, right? Oh boy, here comes the Tainted Indulgence. That kind of almost solidifies it. You know, most of the decks aren't going to deck Tainted Indulgence unless they're running the Parhelion combo. So we're feeling relatively confident that our opponent is, in fact, trying to run the combo and trying to pitch Parhelions in the bin and reanimate them with Okiba Mob Boss. So last turn we deploy a Wedding Announcement, and then it makes a 1/1 at the end step. So we're trying to decide how to go about it, and we don't need very many white sources in the deck. Briefly debated getting the second one because sometimes you want to be able to both play and deploy the Paladin class, but we decide, given the amount of black sources in our hand, you know, the Meathook Massacres and the Murderous Riders and the Massacre Girls and things, it's more likely we're going to want to double spell the other way and need a whole bunch of black sources instead. So our opponent pulls out a Void Rend and hits our Wedding Announcement. Not strictly thrilled about that. We were hoping to draw some cards. Didn't happen though. Castle Ardenvale is starting to make us a little bit concerned. We're still worried about the Mob Boss, but a lot of them, there aren't too many Mob Boss decks that are running Castle Ardenvale, right? So, okay, let's crash in. There's kind of this internal debate going on about whether or not we just let it hit, because 4 damage is enough to put a counter on the Knight of the Ebon Legion, but we could pump, right? So, opponent definitely representing something at instant speed, and we, you know, we have this kind of, again, internal debate and stuff going on. We decide to hold up Murderous Rider just in case they do have like loot stuff at the end, and then an Okiba Mob Boss to go with their turn, and we just lose, right? We're trying to avoid the just lose part. Opponent has March of Otherworldly Light to prevent the counter. Okay. Bummer. But our opponent also has Cycle Shark Typhoon for 0, making a dude and then having it die. Opponent on 9 life. Okay. Well, 6 cards in hand, and it's a land. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Oh. So maybe there are no Greasefangs after all. Our opponent decides to draw a card, going to untap some lands. We don't want the possibility of Dovin's Veto to come back and haunt us, so we remove it right now. You know, there's no scrying or anything involved, so it's not like us killing it. Like, we wait until the untap trigger is on the stack or something. No, they need to play their land. There's no reason to wait. Just do it now, right? There is a reason not to, or like not to wait, is that I could accidentally misclick, and from time to time it's like you click one too many times and it's like, oh no, it's now my turn, and that would have been disastrous. Allowing, you know, Teferi to just untap, even if I was still able to cast it, could mean they counterspell me. But worse yet, if I click one too many times, then it ends up on our turn. Then it would be a full-on disaster. So since there was no reason to wait, and some at least spurious reasons to do it now. We elect to do it now. Teferi trying to decide which lands to untap. Likely going to be Rafine's Tower, but could also be either Drowned Catacombs or Godless Shrine. Presumably they want to go for the Drowned Catacombs. I think it's more likely they would want double blue than like double white or double black, but I was mistaken, and it turns out it doesn't matter at all, and they just go with Godless Shrine. We do draw our 5th land, which is nice. It's Massacre Girl can now be deployed should the situation warrant, and we get a wedding announcement down and draw into a Paladin Class. Hey! Okay, that feels good. Opponent on 6 life, definitely fighting for their life. Goes with another Teferi, though. Shoot! Folks, not a fan. Not a fan. Teferi Hero of Dominaria, going to make our life very difficult. We are now confronted with the possibility that, are we supposed to go after Teferi, or are we supposed to go after the life total? Right? If Paladin Class resolves, we don't make them dead with this attack. But Teferi drawing extra cards might make us dead. So after a little bit of deliberation, we do decide to go after Teferi. The Paladin Class really helping here because it makes a spell more expensive. So they have to have like Fatal Push or something to be able to kill it. Oh, it's March of Otherworldly Light. And they did have the Dovin's Veto, folks. So inconvenient. Teferi doesn't die. And that makes us exceedingly sad inside. Like, very, very sad. Because suddenly, that Teferi staying on board can kill us. And they have the Castle Ardenvale, so they can just make chump blockers that block our 2/2. Which, of course, we could, you know, level up the Paladin Class, give it double strike, grow it some, and things, maybe even threaten lethal. But at the very least, that is stopped just by our opponent not doing anything. They just continue to draw extra cards, right? That part feels absolutely terrible. So we're trying to decide how to go about this. Elect to just deploy the planes and go to combat. Deciding that maybe Castle Ardenvale, you know, is the path for us as well. Our opponent does allow it. And briefly debate, like, Murderous Rider or Castle Ardenvale, depending on what they did. Since they just kind of let it through, didn't bother with Castle Ardenvale or anything, we were thinking they might have ways of drawing cards and stuff, and we decided that maybe we can draw out a counterspell with the Massacre Girl. And of course, if they don't have the counterspell, then this is also good, where we just, you know, develop our board into a, you know, closer to lethal sort of situation. And they do, in fact, have ways of drawing cards. It was a Memory Deluge. Wedding Festivity flips over. And now, folks, Massacre Girl individually lethal. The 3/3s together are lethal. And we could theoretically level up the Paladin Class to make both the Massacre Girl and a 3/3 lethal on their own, right? And then just the other 3/3 ready to go and do our bidding, so to speak. That said, our opponent has roughly 250 million cards in hand. I did the math. I'm not great at math, but I did the math. It's unlikely they have no answers. It's just a question of which answers they have. Well, they go with Tainted Indulgence, which tells us they don't have the answers they want, right? Maybe they just, you know, they're looking for, let's say, Doomscar or something like that, and didn't have it, so they make a land drop. It's an island. And they're reading Massacre Girl. The only text that matters right now is Menace, right? It's big and menacing. But our opponent trying to decide how to go about this, because again, the Paladin Class making our opponent's life just a little bit challenging. If it's going to require a double spell, you know, like a single target removal, that's tough. Because now all the 3/3s are lethal, right? Because they're likely to need to do it on their own turn to prevent the Paladin Class text from mattering. So it's likely they need to point a removal spell at, like, let's say Massacre Girl now, And then maybe they can wait until our turn to use the other single target removal spell. Which would be important because then... Oh, well, they just have Vanishing Verse as their targets. So they go after our way of buffing our creatures, which is not ideal. So, fine. Well, briefly debate how to go about it and decide I think everything is worth the risk. We go in for 4. Aaron takes 4. And we're just like, okay, well, Meathook Massacre, lethal, Tainted Indulgence, digging for a counterspell, and Meathook Massacre resolves, life gain spell. No, we gotcha, Aaron, we gotcha. GG. And folks, we are back, and boy, we had a great time. Honestly, the deck did really well. Admittedly, it also did exactly what we asked of it. It kind of preyed on the mono red style players, and but also just had a relatively proactive game plan. So it was really nice, and with the value on so many of these creatures, there's just lots of ways of kind of getting built in 2-for-1s. So the Paladin class is kind of nice because it disrupts your controlling opponents, but it also, you know, can turn your tiny little itty-bitty threats from either Castle Ardenvales or, you know, Knights of the Ebon Legion, Murderous Riders, things like that, into threats that just kill your opponent all on their own. Similarly, the Wedding Announcement both works as the Anthem, which gets around the Kaervek, but it also either draws us cards or makes 1/1s and things like that, right? The Slaughter Specialist getting large, the Yahenni getting large. Like, there's just lots of different angles that this deck attacks that your opponents need to answer. We ended up going 7-2 in the games. The only game you didn't end up seeing was a mono red game where we just didn't do anything. Got stuck on lands and, you know, nothing happened. But you'll also note that there was another win you didn't see either, and that's because we were on the play and we went Knight of the Ebon Legion into Slaughter Specialist, and they made their second land dropping conceded. So I don't know what the heck they were up to, but they didn't cast a single spell, and they decided they couldn't beat what we had. So they scooped it up. So all told, it was a 78% win rate. We went, like I say, 7-2. We were 83% on the play, 67% on the draw. We lost the one life gain deck and, again, a mono red deck. But we also won 3 times against mono red, which I think is a fine record to have, right? Going forward, what might you do? Well, folks, we struggled with lands kind of robustly, honestly. And we're on 24 and 2 Hagra Maulings. We're on 26 lands. I don't know why sometimes the deck hates me. So I don't know if I'm just being super unlucky or if there's something in the algorithm that maybe since I included the Massacre Girls, maybe the deck is just like, well, you don't need lands or something. I don't know. But we're on 26. We should be able to cast Massacre Girl on numbers because of the Hagra Maulings, right? That did not kind of bear itself out. So I don't know. Maybe the Massacre Girls aren't worth it. Or maybe one of the Kaerveks isn't. Because we didn't have it come up, but I could definitely envision a scenario where since you have 4 of them, you could end up with like 2 or 3 in your hand, and then some get stranded or something. Maybe that could be inconvenient. So maybe you go down to one of these, and go down a couple of these, and I don't know. Anything else? I guess. You know, presumably something maybe down here. So if you were going to get rid of the Massacre Girls specifically, I think you'd want to go with more Meathook Massacres. A lot of what she gives you, Meathook Massacre also gives you. The thing that it notably does not give you is a body. So the fact that she is a 4/4 menace is relevant, folks. So I do not think that this is just a strict upgrade here. But considering the mana problems, maybe the deck does improve, right? And then maybe if you're going down a Kaervek, maybe you go up something down here as well. So maybe Knight of the Ebon Legion or Bloodchief's Thirst or something like that, maybe. Just for more consistency's sake. Particularly, you know, if you were having to spend wild cards to craft the Kaervek, the 4th one it probably has a lot less value than the first 3 do. So that might be a change you make, just for budget purposes, if not performance issues. That said, the deck did really good, folks. Again, we went 7-2 in Diamond, where there were a bunch of people, you know, we didn't face anything that was truly off meta. I had a few surprises that maybe decks we weren't strictly expecting, but it was, you know, it was all meta all day essentially, and it did just fine. Admittedly, maybe that might be a problem. Maybe you craft this at Platinum 4, and maybe you face off against some of the decks that aren't Tier 1. Maybe they're the Tier 2 decks and stuff like that. So, for instance, I think we might struggle some against Mono Green in the current configuration. The Gifted Aetherborn specifically are kind of a nod that direction, because they keep us in the game with the lifelink and also give Death Touch, so they trade up. The Slaughter Specialist grows and things. But just the fact that their creatures are going to be so large and being able to fight a lot, that giving them -1/-1 just isn't going to help that much. Things like that. So maybe you'll struggle there. But on the whole, I really can't complain. I think the deck did great, and I would not discourage you from building it. If you do, let me know. Let me know how it goes, and just, you know, we'll maybe bounce some ideas off one another and maybe make some progress that direction. Either way, I appreciate you watching, and I will look forward to seeing you next time.